Have a huge market crash for corn and soybeans this Friday. Jerry Gidel is ready to analyze and tell us why, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, how are you today? I don't see any fundamentals that would explain all this small market crash, but well, what do you think made it?
Well, the one thing we always got to remember that Fridays are days that either people want to be out of the market because they don't know what to expect the next week, or they're all bulled up because it's going to be something dynamic over the weekend, usually hot weather in the US, and so they rally it going into it. This isn't a situation where the traders in the US and around the world have any idea for sure what's going on in South America. We've had all these weather ups and downs all year here with the dry weather in the north, wet weather in the south in Brazil. Argentina's been kind of quiet over there. Now all of a sudden we've got a big heat wave projected. It's actually started already, and it's going to continue for at least through next weekend. And there's some talk that might even go on for further than that, which would be quite interesting in this thing. The most of the attention, as we've talked about, has always been on Brazil here because of their weather situations they had earlier in the season. I can't say that they're completely straightened out at this point. I think there's issues on second crop corn that's still highly important, but in the short term, in that we're into the harvest and we're trying to figure out how big the crop's going to be. And at this point, this is all in front of next Thursday's USDA crop report, where the U.S. is going to, excuse me, the USDA's and the foreign agricultural people are going to try to come up with some estimates for Brazil. And that we've had a lot of small other analysts out there they're projecting some pretty significant declines at 150 from 157 the USDA has now to as much as 145. Some even people further than that. There's even one guy today that doubled down and went even further down into the 130s, and that on the Brazilian crop. And then at the same time, on the corn side, in implications of what could happen in Argentina this next week, I think there's even a possibility earlier we might have seen them increase that number in that. But I would have to say the USDA is always cautious about going one direction and going back the other. So they don't tend to like to do that. They've kind of stayed with their estimates for a couple months, and I kind of feel like they're going to do the same thing on Argentina. But that doesn't mean that the assumptions will be on next month's numbers there in March that we have a hot streak in here that we could end up having some damage to the corn crop and even to some extent the soybean output if it continues more than a week for sure on beans. And this don't say that, by the way, there hasn't been a little dry down there for the first, say, the last week or so. It's a combination of dryness that's now getting heat and dryness in Argentina, which is really an interesting factor on those beans down there in Argentina and South America. But it's quite interesting. In the face of all that conversation, here we are breaking the market going into the weekend here in soybeans and pulling the corn down. Very interesting situation to say the least on that. As it's just that it gets back to the reluctance of people wanting to be involved in a market they don't have a lot of knowledge on, and I think that's what prompted this unusual pullback here on a Friday in face of some South American weather.
Now we have anticipated for several weeks that the Brazilian corn crop can be reduced significantly. Now, what I think that also can happen is that Argentina will increase its market share of corn in the world.
Oh, I think that's a possibility there. The interesting thing about it is that the timing here on uh, their plantings and heat and things like that could impact their output. But they're going to have let's be sure that make sure everybody knows we're going to have a lot bigger corn crop in South America and excuse me in Argentina and Brazil than they had last year. This is not going back to the 25 million metric ton bean crop and the 35 million metric ton corn crop. Yeah, we're talking right now the USDA's number on corn is 55 and it's 52, I think it is on beans, or that on that. And so, we're going to have some impacts on potential sizes if this weather continues we just talked about. But at the same time, uh, they're going to be competitive out there. There was a big announcement today that they going back over January when they made the big currency adjustments back at the end of December, and the new Mealy government down there turns up that that created a big demand for soybeans, and so they've people have been producers are selling and people are buying during this last month. So they kind of cleaned out probably all those leftists down there in Brazil, other than what would be crushed. And the crushing industry has really been getting beat up badly in this whole situation. So that's another feature out there on meal and oil from that standpoint. So yeah, the South American uh, shipments could be shifted around a little bit here because of the weather situations we've had to this point. I kind of feel like on the corn myself, I'm looking for a 150 5 million metric ton decline on the uh, corn at this point. Uh, Down closer to the 121, 122 level. And on the bean side, I'm looking at 152 down from 157 on those numbers because uh, the those numbers were already kind of already there. I think there's a lot of people accepting that those are that now. Are we going to make that push down below 150 in beans and down below 120 or down to 117? I think those would be interesting if the USDA and ConAb and people like that would push those numbers down to those levels. I think that along with the heat then that we have projected for Argentina could make things quite volatile next week.
Oh, and by the way, just a parenthesis here, there is a widespread criticism of CONAB in Brazil like never before. There is a difference that is so high about the output estimates. But I would like to jump into the US factors. You mentioned crush, and crush has increased in the United States, as well as demand from ethanol. At the same time, the cattle herd is the lowest since 1951.
Yes. Well, that is quite a contrast. And that the one thing that you got to note, though, interestingly enough, in the world of cattle and the feed rations that they use and how they fatten themselves up versus uh, most cases in the U.S., soybean meal is not part of their particular ration. It's that's something for simple stomach animals, chickens and pork, and that. And so the direct connection on this is low. But the one thing you definitely reported that 204 million monthly exports, excuse me, monthly U.S. soybean crush was a record. And we've had records, interestingly enough, every month this year. But as we just mentioned, the issues that's gone on in Argentina, they really have not been in the world. We're exporting this stuff, we're using it domestically. uh, in that on the soybean side of things. So that really does look like a positive thing. And the other backside of this thing, which is there's some issues over there concerning RENs and some other things involving the soybean oil. And that we do have a demand for renewable diesel in this country, and it's very strong. So I think that's another feature involved in the soybean uh, processing world. The one thing about it is that we probably have, let's just say we're in January, we probably have about 3 months, maybe four, before Argentina is going to end up having enough of their crop in that they can start to reboost their crushing industry down there. And so the last half of our year here on U.S. crush is a little shaky. So what might or might not happen on the soybean side, but I kind of feel like there's issues down there on the crop size that the exports will stay strong enough to make some compensation for it, and say you know, in the late spring and summer periods. But that's one of the things that's out ahead of us here in the short term.
And how do you think things are heading up for the U.S. planting intentions?
Planting intentions, I keep trying to figure out why a producer out there is going to plant more beans. Uh, if the price of beans and soybeans right now are at $12, and uh, they're not down alone, but they're not the encouraging number versus corn at this point to really expand our plantings. The talk is kind of vacillated from about 1.5 to maybe 2 million more acres. I kind of feel like that's a little less than we really need. I think I've always kind of thought we needed closer to 2.5 to 3 million minimal. And to some extent, we need to keep building if we're going to go towards some of the renewable diesel demands that the West Coast supposedly has in store out that direction. So that's an interesting situation on that. So it's interesting to get producers to do certain things. You have to also encourage them in their soybean prices, or discourage them in soybeans and encourage them in corn. And right now, say, well, why would they still plant corn if it's just at loan? Well, they know it's there, and they can make it work. They feel more comfortable about that in the past. We really need 3 million less corn more than we do 3 million more beans, but it's kind of a trade-off on that situations most of the time. And we've also already had a pretty substantial 2+ million decline in winter wheat planting. So some of those acres have to go somewhere. That could mean they go into sorghum. So that would be competitive to corn too along the way. But on the domestic side of things here too, we talked about these meal scenarios and the connection that's going on here with Argentina, things like that. On the ethanol side of things, and that we had some very, very strong numbers there too on our world or on our monthly numbers that came out this week, and that we've actually ended up having our strongest monthly corn usage, about 480, I think it was 82 million bushels on that. Now, that's not the highest we've had back in 2019 and 20 and 21. We had some very poor quality corn in the U.S., so we had to actually process more corn to get the ethanol we needed. Not the case here. This is a pretty solid crop this year. So this is kind of showing that that the ethanol demand is strong and positive in that regard from there. And so I think the key feature on the whole thing is that that ethanol extends your supply of fuel in the U.S. And it's right now it's not that expensive, relatively speaking. It's a little bit higher than what gasoline is, but not much. And we've had situations where Uh, it's a scenario that even slips down below the price of gasoline. Right now, gasoline's pretty inexpensive in the short term. That doesn't mean things can't change, but I kind of feel like the ethanol side of things here is domestically is positive, and as I said, I think that the South America is really the key feature here on our exports are going to finish up the rest of the year, primarily from the standpoint that we're running ahead of last year. We're running along near the 5-year trend on corn. We're right on the scenario on soybeans. From there, we don't have a, a huge trend right now. We got a pretty tight supply at 280 million carryover stock, I should say. I'm kind of looking for a small decline on that as the USDA kind of looks at South America and looks at where we're at right now, and we might see a shift of 30 million down to 250 million. That's not uh, like, wow, we're going to the moon. If we're under 200, then that's a different story, but that isn't the case. Most likely it's not going to happen next Thursday when the USD updates their amounts. I think the same thing could happen in the corn because of the fact that we already, as I think, suggested we're going to have some reduction closer to the 150, 152 zone from the USDA. The trade's kind of looking for those kind of numbers at this point. Actually, I'll take that back. They're looking for 154 now to think about it from there. But in general, unless we get under 150, is going to be totally crazy. But I think there's a situation where both those numbers are going to come down just slightly, both beans and corn on carryover stocks. But right now, I think the big focus will be next week is how does that Argentine crop fare with the heat that's there, and how long does that heat continue down there will be the kind of the market factors that will impact our prices going into the USDA's report on Thursday when we get an update about where things stand in both our carryover stocks in the US and how South America looks.
All right, we'll discuss again next week.
Right. Let's hope this thing kind of stands together here. They put it sliding to below $12 this week. Friday was a little nerve-wracking. Hopefully there's some people that will be a little more excited about this market next week on this weather in Argentina, but that's what we always have to deal with. It's not just one person's idea. There's all kinds of people in this market. Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
very much. Bye bye.
Take care.